I've just experienced the most beautiful picture quality I've ever seen from a direct view display, and I'm going to tell you all about it. Hello everyone, my name is Vincent Teo. I'm a TV reviewer and professional calibrator. And this small display here is a Sony BVM-X300 professional broadcast monitor. Now, I've seen this display on trade shows. For example, when LG did their W7 launch in San Francisco, they were using this monitor for side-by-side comparison against their E7 OLED to judge color accuracy and also near black handling and specular highlight tone mapping. Panasonic also has actually used this monitor on their trade shows and annual convention, for example, the recent one in Frankfurt, where they were displaying this against their EZ1002. And I was clearly very impressed by the picture then, but it is only now that I have the opportunity to get one of these fantastic displays into my own test room to assess, to run my array of tests. And I just have to tell you that this is a work of marvel. It is so impressive, and I'll tell you the reason why. But before that, let's start with the specifications of this display and also the price. Now, as you can see, this monitor is fairly small compared with the large screen televisions that we normally review on this channel. It's only 30 inches in screen size, and it has a fairly thick bezel around the screen. This is an OLED display which uses a true RGB subpixel. On current consumer OLEDs that are available to buy on the market, the subpixel structure is usually WRGB, and that is the most commercially viable technique that is manufactured and sold by LG Display. But this uses a true RGB subpixel structure, and it is very no frills. The resolution is a true 4K resolution of 4096 times 2160. So if you display an Ultra HD Blu-ray or any 69 content for that matter, the sides will display some black bars because the aspect ratio is slightly wider than the UHD resolution of 3840 times 2160 pixels. Now, it is a 4K screen, a true 4K screen, and it can actually do HDR as well, and it can reach a peak brightness of around 1000 nits, and I'll show you later when I actually run the measurements. So this is a 4K HDR professional broadcast monitor. It doesn't even come with a remote control. All the buttons are in front of the screen. You can buy a remote control separately, but I believe that is wired, so even that is not a wireless infrared control. But all the buttons are found in front of the screen, and if you want to make any adjustments or toggle between, let's say, SDR and HDR or 2K resolution and 4K resolution, then you have to use all these dials and buttons on the screen itself. There are no speakers on this monitor, but there is a headphone jack that you can put in for you to monitor the sound when you're doing the mastering. There is no HDCP compliance, so if you're trying to play a regular Blu-ray or an Ultra HD Blu-ray, or even from a SkyQ box, all of them are HDCP encrypted, so you will need to find some sort of way to try and get the signal to display on screen. Otherwise, the monitor won't even sync at all. Right, it's a 30-inch screen, it's a 4K HDR monitor. This is the monitor that is used by colorists to master SDR and 4K HDR content up to 1000 nits. So most of the Ultra HD Blu-rays that are mastered to 1000 nits, it is very likely that the studios are using this monitor to master it in terms of the shadow detail rendition, in terms of the color accuracy, in terms of the PQ EOTF tone mapping. So this is the reference. I mean, it can't get any better than this. This is the true. When I say that something is reference, it means that this accurately reflects the director's and producer's intention, because this is in fact the monitor that is used in post-production studios when they are actually doing the post-production, the grading and the mastering. So you can't get any better than this, and it has a price to match as well. The price is £30,000 in terms of the UK retail price, which means that it is £1,000 per inch. But I'm going to tell you what is so impressive about this monitor in a second. So when you put a probe on this monitor, you will find that if you go into the user menu, if you go through the menu system, there's a 2-point grayscale control, but there's no 21-point grayscale control as found on the LG OLED and the Samsung latest QLEDs. And there is no color management system at all as found on most TVs on the market except for the Sony's. So there are no effective multi-point grayscale control and color management system on the set. But once you set the white point correctly, and once I took some measurements, I was just gobsmacked. I'm just totally floored by the accuracy of this monitor is producing. If you look at these Kalman charts here, the grayscale is so flat, and the gamma is so linear to 2.4. This is SDR, by the way. So it's hitting the grayscale accuracy and also the gamma linearity that consumer displays just cannot achieve. And this is as close as out of the box as possible because there's just no multi-point grayscale, multi-point gamma controls or color management system. So this effectively is the native panel response of this Sony BVM-X300 monitor. You can see all the delta errors are below 1. And if we go to a color checker chart, it is just hitting all the color points so accurately. Again, this is HD, SDR, so it is Rec. 709, but this display is hitting all the color charts so accurately, and I'm just totally floored. I'm totally gobsmacked, and I can't believe what I was actually measuring. And it is a revelation. It is an eye-opener. Okay, let's move on to HDR. So if you want to switch to HDR mode, it's a hassle as well because you can feed the monitor a 4K signal, and then you have to change resolution on the screen. You have to change the color gamut from BT709 to BT2020, and you have to change the EOTF tracking from 2.4 to the PQ ST2084 standard, which is the current open standard for HDR10. And you have to do that manually. There's no, I mean, you can make things easier by programming it into certain button macros, but for all intents and purposes, you have to do this manually by adjusting the dial, pressing the buttons all manually. So it's a pain, but the ultimate, I think, obviously this is not a consumer display. This is meant for the professional world, and so I may be complaining too much about the interface because it is not meant to be used. It is not a plug and play display, so to speak. But once we put it into the proper PQ-EOTF tracking with a 4K resolution, and we start measuring the PQ-EOTF, we can see that the peak brightness is hitting as close to 1000 nits as possible. And then the PQ-EOTF tracking, once we start measuring it, it's just spot on. It's just bang on. It's just tracking the PQ-EOTF curve. For those of you who don't know the PQ-EOTF curve, PQ stands for perceptual quantization and EOTF stands for electro-optical transfer function. And this dictates how the input signal should be translated into light output or on-screen luminance. Now, there is a standard within the HDR10 format, and the standard is the ST2084 as published and adopted by SMPTE. Initially, Dolby came up with it, but it has since been adopted as an open standard. So you can see that this Sony BVM-X300 professional broadcast monitor is just following that line as accurately as possible. I've never seen this on any consumer displays, and this goes all the way up to 1000 nits. And interestingly, this display has been set to clip beyond 1000 nits. So let's say if you play 4000 nits content, or let's say any content that contains specular highlight beyond 1000 nits, then the specular highlight will be discarded and won't be displayed on this monitor. But for all intents and purposes, I think this is as good as it gets within the SDR and also the HDR realm up to 1000 nits. So how does things look on this monitor with this sort of colorimetry, this sort of color accuracy? I can only say that I'm I'm just totally blown away. It is absolutely breathtaking. I've never seen Blu-ray look this good before. And the reason is because of, I think there are a couple of factors. Obviously, this is an OLED panel and it can achieve inky blacks, 0 CDM square, true 0 CDM square blacks. So that is without question. But then again, so can most of the WRGB OLEDs, consumer OLEDs on the market. But what differentiates this broadcast monitor from other consumer displays is, I think it is just the gamma linearity of being able to track 2.4 all the way. I mean, I ran a 21-point gamma measurement, and I even ran a 56-point gamma measurement, and it's so flat. It's flatter than and I'm telling you, it is so flat, and I'm just totally blown away. I'm lost for words. The effect this has on the picture is astounding. Basically, what I'm seeing is an amount of pop and depth from any images. It's not only from Blu-rays, even from, let's say, SkyQ programs. I'm seeing an insane amount of pop and depth that I cannot actually get from any consumer displays, and I'm really upset about this. But it's just a revelation. It's just eye-opening. And I also know that when it tracks the gamma so linearly, the amount of shadow detail that you're actually seeing from the screen is actually correct. It's actually spot on. So once I've had this monitor in for testing, I have run all my usual reference discs, scenes from The Dark Knight, scenes from Skyfall, and they have never looked better. I've never seen them looking better. And in the darkness, the shadows, when you see some shadow detail, you know that that is correct. That is how much shadow detail you should be seeing. And blacks remain inky black. And the colors, they are flesh tones. Foliage, sky, all these memory colors, they all look just so natural, so inviting. And I can't believe, I think many people who watch this monitor with me basically say that they can't believe high definition, just normal Blu-ray or even from SkyQ programs can look this good. And it is the gamma linearity, the colorimetry accuracy, and also the native black level of this true RGB OLED monitor can provide to the picture. I'm really upset because I know that I will never be able to afford this. This is £30,000. I wish I could afford it. I wish Sony would loan one to me long term, but that is never going to happen. So I am just really upset that this sort of picture quality cannot be seen on a consumer display that I can afford or even anyone else can afford. But hopefully we'll get there one day. Right, that was SDR. Alright, there's one thing in SDR before I actually forget. I talk about colorimetry accuracy. Obviously, we were only measuring 75% video stimulus, which is when you see most of these color charts, it is usually done with a 75% video stimulus, which means that it is fairly bright. But consumer OLEDs generally have difficulty displaying low stimulus, and they tend to oversaturate colors at low stimulus, let's say at 5%, 10% or 20% video stimulus. So I ran a quick saturation sweep with the video stimulus lowered to around 20%, 10% and 5%. And this display just tracks it accurately without any problem, without any oversaturation. So when you look at really dark scenes with like red hue or yellow hue, for example, the one in The Dark Knight Rises where Catwoman is trying to make a deal in a CD bar, or for example when Daniel Craig is in a Shanghai bar in Skyfall, then the amount of hue is very natural. The amount of light that reflects off their faces in a dark environment is very natural. It's not as strong and powerful as what the consumer OLEDs these days tend to portray. So from that point of view, hats off to Sony engineers. My hats off to whoever designed this monitor. This is a reference grade standard. I mean, this is something that I I hope I will be seeing more of, but I wish I could see every single day. And let's move on to HDR then. So for HDR, we know that the monitor clips beyond 1000 nits. So if I display, let's say, Sicario, this dark scene here, it doesn't contain specular highlight beyond 1000 nits. So it's still being displayed very, very accurately with just the correct amount of darkness and shadow detail. And then if we display a scene in Kingsman, a fairly bright scene with all the colors, you know that this is the correct colors. All of them just look so natural with the correct brightness and luminance at each part of the image. But if you display a scene that contains specular highlights more than 4000 nits, for example, the scene in Pan, the sun is blowing out slightly. The scene in Pacific Rim, the clouds are starting to disappear. And this scene in Batman vs. Superman, Ben Affleck's white shirt tend to lose their creases and folds. But that is just a small problem. Personally, this display is a work of art. It's marvelous. It's something that I wish I could keep, but I have to return it. And I hope you appreciate just how good this display is. It's certainly not affordable, but if you are mastering, or if you are, one thing that I need to tell you about too is that this is geared towards the professional broadcast community. So if you are trying to play a 24 frames per second movie through a Blu-ray player to the screen, it doesn't do any 5.5 pull down or 4.4 pull down or any pull down whatsoever. So there will always be the 3:2 telecine judder. And it has no upscaling capability, so you have to switch between 2K and 4K for the appropriate resolution. There is no motion interpolation, so motion resolution came in at a sample and hold baseline of 300 lines, according to this test pattern. But there is a rolling scan which you can activate by turning flicker free off. This would increase motion resolution to about 700 lines. But more interestingly, this doesn't actually introduce any drop in luminance at all, as you can see from these measurements I'm doing with the Jetty 1511 spectral radiometer, although the flicker is actually much more visible depending on the frame rate. So generally, I would just turn flicker free on. And because there is almost no video processing whatsoever, input lag is extremely low. It's probably the lowest input lag I've ever measured on any display outside of gaming monitors. It is only 12 milliseconds according to our Leo Bodnar tester, which makes the Sony BVM-X300 an extremely responsive 30,000 pound gaming monitor. But yes, this is the Sony BVM-X300. It is unbelievably good. It is just mind-blowingly good. It is something that I wish I could afford, but I can't. But I'm here to tell you about it. And it is a display that has produced by far the most inviting, the most beautiful, and the most accurate picture that I've ever seen. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the HDTV Test YouTube channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time.